Oh, now I get to introduce Kriss Schorer. This is the best part of the program here. Kriss Schorer and her husband Jim live in Bailey's Harbor. She belongs to one of our old Bailey's Harbor families, the McCardles, who've been supporters and members of St. Mary of the Lake Catholic Church for generations. Kriss is very active in the current Stella Maris Parish, and she loves local history, especially Bailey's Harbors. She seemed to be the perfect person to do the presentation. And of course, when we asked her, she replied with an enthusiastic yes, as she has the 2 previous times we've asked her to come up with a presentation. I know you're going to enjoy it. She always does a spectacular job. And then she has her #1 assistant, Jim, who I know participates and encourages her along the way. So Kriss, come on up.
I keep that for Father Dave. Good evening. Before I start this evening, we have our current pastor of Stella Maris Parish, St. Mary's, here with us tonight, and he has to leave, so he'd just like to say a few words. Father Dave Ruby.
Wonderful to be here tonight because, first of all, I'm a big fan of history. I love studying history because you come to know not only the heroes but the heroines. And we know that as we study that and understand that better, we know that...
Father, let me give you the mic.
There's a microphone.
You were supposed to give it.
Oh, I didn't. Where did you have it?
That's the laser mic.
It's here. Okay, there.
Usually people tell me I'm too loud.
Oops. Save the pieces, David.
I said I'm very happy to be here tonight because I love studying history. I love to know the heroes and the heroines because I think that history is full of both of those, but also as we get to know ourselves, we know there's a hero and a... Oh, I'm not saying that right. Not hero and heroine, hero and villain. Villain. The heroes and villains of history. And we know that in each and every one of us, there's a hero and a villain as well. We have the good parts and the bad parts we have to continue to embrace. But I love our church, and I know that there's always good parts and bad parts, and I love our Stella Maris especially. And of course, I live in Bailey's Harbor, so I have a special connection to Bailey's Harbor as well. So I very much enjoy learning about the history of our parish, and especially in Bailey's Harbor. And I know that we have a lot of good things that have happened over the years, and I know this is the oldest of our churches and the oldest of our parish, and it's very wonderful to connect with that and be a part of that. And I'm very happy that Kriss is always updating me about what she knows in history, and I'm very happy to hear about that, and I know these 2 work very hard on that. But it is a wonderful history, and I'm very proud of it, and it has helped us to be who we are today, and I'm very glad. I am a little sad these days that we're losing our hardware store, though. I hope that doesn't happen. I'm sorry to get political, but I really hope it doesn't happen. I don't care about the bigger political issues. I care about Bailey's Harbor. Anyway, so I'm very grateful that Kriss can do this tonight with Jim, and I'm sure they'll do a wonderful job, and they'll help you to know a lot of things, and that they'll continue to help us to appreciate our history. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Father Dave. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who came tonight to hear this presentation. I hope you find it as interesting as I did when we started digging through things for it. The history of the early beginnings of St. Mary of the Lake Parish is one of dedication and devotion by the early settlers and the priests that served them. The early history is rather fragmented, but information has been gathered from an assortment of documents to assemble a valid history that is as quaint as it is inspiring. The first missionaries that arrived in Door County and to the area around Bailey's Harbor were the Jesuit priests. They came from Quebec, Canada in the early 1600s, so they've been around for a long time. Among them were Fathers Marquette, Alloway, and Andre. The Jesuit relations report that they did missionary work with the Potawatomi Indians in the early 1600s, finding them mixed in with villages of Sioux and Outagammis all over the peninsula and even throughout Wisconsin. In the early 1800s, immigrant settlers began arriving in Bailey's Harbor, and the arrow shows you about where Hibbert's Creek is, and there was a large Indian settlement in that area. Early parishioners told us stories of a lone missionary arriving in the middle of the 1800s. He crossed Kangaroo Lake, which I found rather interesting that he was coming from that way. He was carrying his little mission altar on his back. He was likely one of the early Jesuit fathers who were here visiting the Indians and the white settlers, teaching, converting, and spreading the kingdom of God. He would stay a few days, then go on to visit another isolated community in this section. Father Pernin was the pastor of the parish in Peshtigo. Peshtigo is right here. Bailey's Harbor was established as his mission in 1860, according to the 1936 dedication book of the new church. The history of Door County shows it was organized in 1862 by Father Bernier, who was stationed between Oconto and Peshtigo. At that time, a missionary would arrive twice a year. You can see he would come down the Peshtigo River, probably take his canoe or maybe something a little bigger across, and that was one of the shortest distances across to the peninsula. Come over into the area of Egg Harbor, and from there, it wasn't too bad a hike across to Bailey's Harbor. The priest would paddle his way across Green Bay in the summer or walk across the ice in the winter, make his way through the woods, across the peninsula, to reach his flock in Bailey's Harbor. Not an easy journey. On the day of his arrival, Catholic families from miles around would be on hand to greet the priest. They brought babies to be baptized. Couples arrived to have marriages blessed. Families had Mass said for members of their family who had passed away, and funeral blessings were offered. Father Pernin didn't leave any kind of a story, so we really don't know what experiences and hardships he encountered along the way over these years, but we can only imagine. In 1870, the northern part of the county fell under the care of Sturgeon Bay and Anape, which is now Algoma. You hear about the Anape Trail. Bishop Metcher thought it would be easier for the pastors of those towns to take charge of the missions in Bailey's Harbor and the newly established mission in Egg Harbor. Can't imagine why it took him that long to figure that out. Father Adler was the pastor of Sturgeon Bay, and he was put in charge of these parishes. He came to Bailey's Harbor on foot or on horseback if he could borrow a horse, or in the winter on the ice. Mass would be said in parishioners' homes with many families together. Catechism was taught, marriages blessed, baptisms performed, and funeral services conducted while he was here. The first Mass was said in the home of the James B. Carr family on the east shore of Kangaroo Lake. We feel it's right about in this area. This home was located near what is the Goss family property, just south of North Kangaroo Lake Road. The area had a large settlement of Irish families from County Louth, Ireland. They kept following each other over here. Life was primitive for those early settlers. For all the hardships of their new life in this new land, God and their faith remained the center of their home. Each day began with family prayers. When no priest was here to say Mass on Sunday or on the holy days, the families would gather together, say the Mass prayers, read the scriptures, and sing songs. The Upper Peninsula of Door County was rapidly expanding from Institute to Raleigh's Bay. Bailey's Harbor especially was developing into quite a town. If any of you recognize, this is now the yum-yum tree. Spectators and workers were attracted to the rich lumbering enterprises, commercial fishing, stone quarries, and farming in the area. Much of this speculation can be credited back to Captain Bailey, who was blown into Bailey's Harbor in 1847 by a Lake Michigan gale. He spent several days exploring the forests of white pine and the ledges of fine building stone. He brought this information back to Milwaukee and Chicago, and many new business enterprises were established in the following years, enough that Bailey's Harbor became the county seat of Door County for several years. Life was still very primitive. There were trails through the woods, and the closest supplies were in Green Bay. These patient and self-sacrificing immigrants cleared the forests and the rock-strewn fields to be able to work the land and earn a living. In 1874, the locality had attracted enough settlers to build a church. Father Rhodey of Anape was the regular visiting priest. 20 families comprised the first congregation, and with their help, the first church was built in 1874. The little white church was 60 by 20 feet, with a 30-foot bell tower and a curved roof over the entry. There was a choir loft at the rear, a pot-bellied stove for heat, which didn't give off a lot of heat. Mass was said twice a month, but God blessed this small congregation. They brought pennies, nickels, and dimes they probably could not even spare, along with their free labor, and built this house of worship. Parishioners Martin Schramm and James McCardle mortgaged their farms to help defray some of the initial costs of the building. The interior of the church at Christmas time shows the sanctuary. The original altar in the center, with the confessional on the right, and the sacristy on the left. And this is the area where the priest dressed and kept his vestments. Note on the pews, there are nameplates. Pew rent was $12 a year. This was discontinued in 1922, so they played that for a long time. A linen cloth on the communion rail was pulled over the top of communicants' hands while they were receiving Holy Communion. These pictures are of some of the original 20 families. Families included the Hugh Collins, Peter Goss, John Lelamont, Tom Goss, John Collins, Con Collins, Henry Pleck, John Sloan, Michael McDermott, Owen Cassidy, James Carr, James McCardle, Martin Schramm, Theodore Zock, John Raza, Lawrence Frank Gray, and Casimir Smith. No sacrifice was too great for these families, and their little congregation grew rapidly. I'm sure you recognize many descendants of these old family names that are still Bailey's Harbor residents and still members of the parish. Father Engelbert Bloom was appointed pastor of St. Joseph's in Sturgeon Bay in 1876. He became the priest for the mission parishes of St. Mary of the Lake and the other congregations in the Northern Peninsula. The mission of St. Rosalia's in Sister Bay was added during this time. Father Bloom oversaw the building of St. Michael's in Jacksonport and St. John the Baptist in Egg Harbor. Just realize that the roads were dirt trails and transportation went either by horseback or buggy. The zeal and stamina of these people, early pioneers and priests, was exceptional. St. Mary of the Lake Cemetery, excuse me, I'm going to just turn this around a little bit. St. Mary of the Lake Cemetery was begun in the early 1880s. It is on the corner of County Double E and Red Cherry, adjacent to the south side of the Bailey's Harbor Town Cemetery. The property was a gift from charter member John B. W. Lalamont. Conrad Faust's great-granddaughter wrote that in 1882, the Faust family came to Door County and were early members of St. Mary's. Conrad Faust helped clear the land for the cemetery and was given 7 graves in return for his work. He is buried there along with his wife and other members of the family. Ignatius Gornkowski was the caretaker of the cemetery. Ignatius built and gifted the 2 shrines at the cemetery that were built with local stones. One is a grotto set into the cedar trees to the north side of the cemetery. The other is on an island in the road that houses a small storage bed to the back of it. Can we see the second one? Here, thank you. These, along with the entry markers, have his trademark of freestanding stones at the top. You can see them up here. Whenever he built things, there was always a stone standing on the top of them. Traditional family plots are positioned in the older part of the cemetery and carry names of many of the original parish families. Several tombstones mark graves from the 1880s. Father G.J. Pellegrin succeeded Father Burns in 1884 and continued the ministry to the people of Bailey's Harbor for the next 2 years. In 1886, Father J. O'Laughlin was appointed the first resident pastor of St. Mary's of the Lake. A note in the Door County Advocate of December 2nd indicates members of St. Mary's Church Society are preparing to give a grand ball at Henricks Hall in Bailey's Harbor on Saturday evening, December 25th. Doesn't say it was a Christmas party, but it certainly sounds like it would be. Father O'Laughlin became ill shortly after arriving and passed away within a year of his appointment. He was buried in St. Mary's Cemetery. No other permanent priest was placed here until 1895. Fathers Hugenroth, Steinbrecher, Hennies came from Sturgeon Bay and Jacksonport to say Mass here. 10 years elapsed before Reverend Father Francis Kroll was appointed as permanent pastor. Father Kroll built the first rectory shortly after his appointment, and the parish assumed stability. This picture is of some of the parishioner men cutting wood for the stove in the church and in the rectory. Looks like they've been working a long time. And the rectory is across the street from the church. In 1909, the roof was raised and a second story was added. A small chapel was on the first floor just off the living room. Walter and Agnes Gornowski Pyle were married in that chapel on November 7th, 1931. The building stood for 66 years, and now it is the swimming pool in front of the beachfront inn. It was dismantled in 1961, so it hung around for a long time. 5 other priests served St. Mary's of the Lake between 1895 and 1907. Father Sieber, Van P., Reed, Zerbach, and Denninger. In 1906, Bishop of Green Bay, Joseph Fox, of the diocese, spoke with the Order of Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate to request that they accept a permanent foundation in the area. The Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate are a Roman Catholic congregation of priests and then brothers founded after the French Revolution. The Oblate missionaries came from their province in Buffalo, New York. The bishop placed the parish of Duck Creek under the Oblate Fathers' care on condition that they take over all the missions and parishes of northern Door County. That was from Institute to Gills Rock. They agreed and sent 3 priests, Father Hartman, Father Diss, and Father Duffy. to take care of all of these parishes, covering over 100 miles. They soon realized that this was a hopeless task for only 3 men. Father L.A. Nolan, an OMI, or an Oblate of Mary Immaculate, was established as pastor of St. Mary's of the Lake when Father Nicholas Hunold as his assistant. They also cared for Egg Harbor and Sister Bay. In the early years, parishioners drove the priest with horse and buggy or cutter to take them on sick calls. Later, a car was available for the priest when the roads were passable. This is a picture of Father Hunold as he's standing in front of the rectory with the old Model T Ford. Father Hunold later took over as pastor of St. Mary's and then again moved on to Egg Harbor. For the next 12 years, Fathers Earhart and Vogel, Gustav and Bernanke were here to guide the growing parish. In the 1986 Century of Faith book, memories of some of the parishioners were shared. They were the memories of their time in the little white church, and they were published in that book. Martin Schramm told of serving as an altar boy. He would receive 10 cents. If the collection was less than 60 cents, he didn't get paid. Helen Sock recalls an old wedding custom where at weddings, 2 altar boys would hold a rope across the aisles or the 2 pews at the back of the church. The bride and the groom could not leave until they gave the boys 10 to 20 cents. Jim McNeely and Tom McCardle tell that they would remove their surpluses as soon as the wedding was over and hurry to the back down the side aisle, and Andrew Zock stood there with a rope waiting for them. This was discontinued in 1926. Florian Katursky remembered that farmers drove to Mass in their buggies, leaving the horses and rigs at Schramm's Hall or at Painter Hall. The proprietors were parishioners and would often serve the rural people coffee before they returned home. Oftentimes, when it was too cold to bring the horses, they would even walk into Mass and then stay and get warm before they headed back. He also remembered a time he and a friend took sneezing powder to the choir loft and blew it out over the congregation. Jeanette and Catherine McCardle remembered singing in the choir with their mother and their sisters Margaret and Delphine, while their father and brothers sat down below in the congregation. If the boys misbehaved, and you know boys, Mother would just clear her throat and they knew they were in trouble. They also recalled sitting on little wood benches in the front rows of the pews to make room for other people in the pews. In 1925, Father William Haley was appointed pastor. The parish had grown to 55 families, and the little white church was outgrown. Father immediately began a remodeling and enlarging project for the church building. By 1926, the expansion was completed to include an enlarged vestibule, a new altar, and an arched entrance to the sanctuary. The sacristy was moved behind the sanctuary, and the confessional moved under the choir loft. The altar is now in the chapel of our current church. The old handmade pews were replaced with new oak pews, and those are also being used in the current church up in the choir loft. A basement was dug for the new addition to hold a furnace. The parishioners blasted the basement and hauled the stones. It was told that even Father Haley drove a team of horses and slushed out the stones to get things moving. Father F.S. McGann arrived in 1927, and the parish enjoyed its largest growth. Activities prevailed to raise funds and encourage fellowship among the parishioners. Card parties were held and were very popular. They were held in the old town hall. And this is the town hall here. This is Bluff Road. And some of these rocks, I think, are still standing there. They were held also of course, this is across from Zach's home. It's now the post office sits on that lot. Other places they were held in later were at the Painter Hotel, which is here, and at Schramm's Hall. And this picture is from the wedding of August Schramm and Martha Kasberek in 1909. And this picture is a little more recent. It's the Painter Hotel, July 4th, 1923. And this was a political speech that was going on. Imagine that. Plays were also very popular for fundraisers during this time. And if you get the chance, there's a couple of the play programs that are over here on the table that are kind of fun to look at. Some were directed by the pastor, others by parishioners, and at times, some are visitors from Chicago. The plays were also held in Schramm's dance hall because there was a stage at the back of the hall. And of course, now that's the Harbor Fish Market. Or at the Old Town Hall. The biggest affair that they held was the annual chicken dinner. It was held in the Old Town Hall. It took all day to cook and mash the potatoes and prepare the coleslaw. They usually served several hundred people. The rest of the dishes were included the chicken were prepared in homes. Canned goods, farm produce, and handcrafted items were sold and raffled also, not unlike what we do today. Father McGann was followed by Father William Darley in 1935, and a new era began for St. Mary of the Lake congregation. On April 10th, 1936, Michael W. McCardle sent a letter to the parishioners of St. Mary's of the Lake, advising them that he was donating the funds to build a new church and rectory for St. Mary's. McCardle was the son of parishioners James and Anna Fagan McCardle. And this is James here. John, I'm sorry. Michael, I'll get it straight, they're all there. He had been born and raised in Bailey Harbor, served Mass as a young boy, and had great love of his home parish. After he obtained his teaching certificate at the age of 16, he taught in Sister Bay and then in Ellison Bay. Next, he attended normal school in Oshkosh, which is now UW Oshkosh, and graduated from there. Then later, he completed a law degree from the University of Wisconsin. After graduating, he traveled, working for the government before settling in Chicago. There, he worked for the Flexible Shaft Company, and that later became Sunbeam Corporation. In 1935, Mr. McCardle was president of Sunbeam Corporation in Chicago and was suffering from the later stages of cancer. His letter advised the parish that because of his health, the building was coming to them sooner than he had intended. He oversaw all the plans and the specifications for the building and advised the parish that there were enough funds there to have a good job done. Michael had also built Maxwell and Braes Resort just south of town. Father Darley and Mr. Frank Huffman, the architect, coordinated the plans for the new building. And here you'll see that it was a verbal understanding that he prepared certain estimates covering the anticipated costs for the church and the rectory in Bailey's Harbor. The plans included the Italian Renaissance-style building. It was to seat 250 people, be constructed of local stone. Clay tiles were to cover the roof. Flashings were to be of copper. All of the interior trim was to be oak. And if you can read through this, apparently there was some discussion about what kind of stone was going to be used. It originally had been shown as being done in brick, but they said no, it would be done with local stones. A stained glass window above the altar with the outstretched arms of the Blessed Virgin Mary was also noted. A choir loft and a parish hall with a kitchen and a stage. He was planning ahead for them to have more plays. in the basement were included. The attached rectory featured 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, a private office, living room, dining room, sunroom, and a kitchen. Also included was a small chapel between the church and the rectory, and a church office at the rectory entrance. And it also included all of the furnishings for the church and the rectory. As many local contractors and skilled craftsmen and tradesmen were used as possible during the construction. Work was begun in the fall of 1935, and in May, the building was sufficiently finished to lay the cornerstone. Bishop Paul Rohde officiated at the ceremony. You notice they did, oops, could you back up one? They did a procession from the old rectory to the site of the new church, so it was just kind of across the street a bit that they all walked together. Father Darley left that spring and was replaced by Father Vincent Cottam, who continued the building supervision. On November 23, 1936, the new church was dedicated by Bishop Paul Rohde. The amazing point, the church was built and furnished for a cost of $50,000. Try that today, huh? After the construction was completed, bids were let out for the dismantling of the old church. And the old church sat in what's now the parking lot of the current St. Mary's, and they didn't take that down until after the church was all completed. Frank Scholl and Jim McCardle won the bid and took the building down piece by piece. Their sons cleaned the lumber and stacked it. Frank took his half and built a cottage on the other side of the harbor. And Jim took his down to Kangaroo Lake to repair the buildings of Kangaroo Lake Resort property that they had just bought. Michael McCardle passed away in May of 1935 and did not see the completion of the building. As a side note, Michael McCardle's love of Bailey's Harbor continues to bless this community of Bailey's Harbor. His estate left funds to construct this town hall and also funds for the Improvement Society and the Men's Club to be used for the general welfare of the town of Bailey's Harbor. Father Cottam left in 1939 to accept a commission in the armed forces. He was followed by Father Henry Burns, Joyce, Fleming, Gallagher, Sullivan, and Quinn with the next 6 years. Father James McCartan guided the parish from 1940 until 1952. During this time, the beautiful stained glass windows above the altar were added. Father George Fox arrived in 1952 and served as pastor until 1935. While he was here, the garden in the south yard in front of the rectory it's Our Lady of Fatima garden, and it's a little prayer garden on the south lawn, was installed in memory of Mimi Williams by her family. Can we have that slide? The next slide. The garden is still there today. In fact, this is a picture of it that was done this spring after the plantings were all done. In 1953, Father John Lenahan arrived with Father Tully as his assistant. The new electronic bills were added at that time to proclaim the age-old Angelus prayer 3 times a day. Father James Noonan was sent to Bailey's Harbor in September of 1956. In the fall of 1968, the care of St. Rosalia's was transferred to the care of Egg Harbor Priest, and St. Michael's of Jacksonport reverted back to the care of Bailey's Harbor. The stained glass windows in the body of the church were added. Each window was a gift from a parishioner or friend. New overhead lights were installed, and the entrance doors were replaced with glass doors. The large mosaics over the front door and a smaller one over the south door were installed. The front door mosaic is named Stella Maris, Star of the Sea, depicts Mary welcoming a fleet of ships into the quiet harbor of her protection. The south mosaic shows rough waters with the 12 apostles huddled in their boats and Christ standing at the helm, calming the seas. In 1961, the parish celebrated its 75th anniversary. On November 29, 1964, a year after the Second Vatican Council of the New Masses, as it was called, was introduced into the U.S. parishes. This picture was taken just before that. This was from my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary in 1962, and it gives you an idea of how the parish looked at this time. A new altar was placed in the sanctuary of St. Mary's of the Lake. Father Noonan faced the parishioners to say Mass. Even more surprising was the fact that the Mass was now said in English. Not only those parishioners were expected to sing and respond to some of the parts of the Mass in English. Shortly after this, the communion rails were removed, and the congregation received while standing rather than kneeling. Father Noonan departed in 1969 and was followed by Father Eugene Tremblay. Father was a retired military chaplain who had great stories to relate to during his sermons. He was also a master of card tricks. They was always entertaining. He expanded the spiritual programs and improved the church property while he was here. For many years, the summer months saw the nuns coming to Bailey's Harbor for 2 weeks to teach faith and prepare the children for First Communion and Confirmation. They also taught the boys to be service at Mass. 2 of Father Tremblay's sister, Sister Eugenia, here, and Sister Celestine. When the nuns were here, many of them stayed at the Collins home. Many visiting priests came during the summer months and helped the local priest with additional masses. They often stayed at Maxwelton Braes or at Kangaroo Lake Resort. They liked Maxwelton because Harry Ridings would let them play golf for free. Under Father Tremblay's guidance, the parish celebrated their 100th anniversary. His message congratulated every member of the parish, both living and dead, for the wonderful spirit, love of their faith, and many sacrifices they'd made to carry out the fire of faith begun by the first families here at St. Mary's of the Lake. A celebration on October 5th, 1986, included Mass by the Bishop Adam Maida, Father Tremblay, and other visiting priests. A dinner held at Mr. G's followed the Masses. A book commemorating the anniversary of St. Mary's of the Lake, including a parish history with photographs from all over the years, was published at that time. And there is a copy of it over here that's kind of fun to look at. In 1987, Father Chester Capucci became the pastor. He always reminded us that the Mass is never ended. The hall kitchen was remodeled while he was here. Over 100 years, Father Chester was the last of the Oblates of Mary priests to serve this parish. He retired in 2000, but continued to spend his summers in Bailey's Harbor and Sister Bay, helping with the additional summer masses. In 2000, the Oblates of Mary Immaculate advised the Diocese of Green Bay and the 5 Northern Door parishes, Sister Bay, Fish Creek, Egg Harbor, Bailey's Harbor, and Jacksonport, that they could no longer manage these congregations. With all 5 churches, Bailey's Harbor, Fish Creek, Jacksonport, Sister Bay, and the Washington Island Mission, now under the Green Bay Diocese care, the bishop appointed Father Matt Seminar a native of Sturgeon Bay, to serve all of the Northern Door Catholic community. The 5 parish offices were consolidated in Egg Harbor. The rectory in Bailey's Harbor became the priest's residence. Father Matt was responsible for all 5 churches, as well as the Washington Island Mission. Under his guidance, a plan was undertaken to unite all the individual parishes into one parish. Quite a task for a young priest. We experienced the first polka mass at St. Mary's of the Lake, followed by a picnic on the lawn and a dance in the hall. Quite a new experience for all of Northern Door County. The church was filled to overflowing. In 2005, the new Stella Maris Parish, Our Lady, Star of the Sea, was blessed, joining all 5 sites into one congregation. Sister Georgia Archer and Sister Jerry Hoyle, who were from Sheboygan, were hired as pastoral associates to help with the programs in the new church organization. Religious education classes were all moved to Bailey's Harbor. The Egg Harbor Rectory was established as the parish office, and all financial programs and administrative activities were consolidated in the new parish organization. The new parish established positions of secretary trustee and treasurer trustee, which were elected positions. They also have a pastoral council and a finance council. These councils have representatives from each of the sites that are members of that. Father Richard Mothy, who is retired from University of Wisconsin Green Bay, and Father Capucci came often to assist with Sunday masses during the summer months and as needed at other times. Father Matt was assigned to a new parish in 2005 and was temporarily replaced by Father Bill Stevenson. Under his guidance, the entire rectory was redecorated, carpet removed, and the beautiful wood floors were then revealed and refinished. Bathrooms were updated, the installed tile at the entry, and everything was painted. An open house gave parishioners a tour of the new living quarters, which many people had never been in any further than the front entry. Father Dave Ruvi arrived at Stella Maris in 2006 from the previous position in, of all places, Oconto. Kind of a return to early beginnings when the priest came from that area of Wisconsin to Bailey's Harbor. Since his arrival, we have added positions of a faith formation director and worship and music director. In 2010, the sanctuary was updated. Carpet was removed and wood flooring installed. A new smaller altar and ambo were built to better match the original furnishings in the sanctuary. On October 23, 2011, the parish celebrated the 125th anniversary of St. Mary of the Lake Parish being founded and the 75th anniversary of the dedication of the new church. Alana Marie Orsted was baptized at that celebration mass. She is the great-great-great-granddaughter of original parishioners Theodore Zock and Martin Schramm. The church was filled with extended families of early parishioners and current Stella Maris families. Everyone enjoyed a luncheon in the hall following Mass. In 2013, the parish hall was remodeled to accommodate the faith formation program of the parish. The stage was removed, and collapsible walls were added to divide the space into 6 classrooms. Also, the heating and air conditioning for the entire building was upgraded. Our students come to Bailey's Harbor after school on the bus on Wednesdays for their religious education classes. 2015 saw the old carpet in the aisles of the church body replaced with wooden flooring to match the existing wood under the pews, and all the pews were refinished. The parish continues to grow. We have all 5 parish sites open from April through October. November through March, 2 sites are alternately closed for 2-month periods. From June through August, there are 10 weekend masses to accommodate our summer residents and visitors to Door County. We have over 30 wedding celebrations each summer, including parishioners and destination weddings. Many of those are here in Bailey's Harbor. We have enjoyed having Father Art Hines, a retired priest from the Milwaukee Diocese, and Father Anthony Birdsell, senior priest of the Green Bay Diocese and former pastor of the Sturgeon Bay Parish. You've heard of the Flying Nun? Well, our Father Dave should be known as the Winging Priest as he travels the northern communities. Stella Maris Parish, St. Mary of the Lake Church, continues to be a central part of the Bailey's Harbor community. The building represents the continued history of both the Catholic faith of the community and the resilience of the early settlers. We welcome all to join us in faith. Our mission statement calls Stella Maris Catholic Parish to prayerfully unite people in the love of Jesus, guided by our patron Mary. Our vision is to invite all to journey as disciples by sharing the gospel, responding to Jesus' love and the gifts God has given us. We welcome all to grow in faith and in our parish life. My family dates back 4 generations of parishioners here at St. Mary's. Most of the research of the history was gathered over many years by my dear aunts Jeanette and Catherine McCardle. Their heavenly guidance made this project much easier, as I just happened to be the holder of all the stuff. I also want to thank my husband Jim for taking care of the slides and his patience while I prepared for this presentation. Many moments of the past are displayed on the tables. Please take a look. Turn them over, look through them, enjoy them. Thank you for coming and allowing me to share this story with you this evening. And if anybody has any questions that I might be able to answer, I'd be happy to give it a try. So. Okay.
Well, I guess you must have done an extremely thorough job there. And I would just like to make a comment. I grew up in Bailey's Harbor, and so the church, although I'm not a practicing Catholic, has always been there, and it's been a beautiful thing to see. And even to this day, I have a very fond recent memory. Well, it wasn't fond because I was attending a funeral, so that was not so happy. But the ladies of that parish really know how to put on a dinner. I just want to say that. It was a fantastic time to share, and it was great. Well, if you have no more questions, I guess I will invite you to our next program, which is on September 14th, I believe, and Nyla Small will be discussing the rural schools in the area. And I'm not sure if she's just limiting to Bailey's Harbor, but we had several. There was our school in town here, the Pershing School and the Polish Settlement, the Kangaroo Lake School, like Peninsula Center School, that's what it was, and a school also in North Bay. So wherever people came together, schools had to be built. And I know my mother taught in those kinds of schools, very small. And the stories of schools in Bailey's Harbor is kind of an interesting one, too. So I hope we'll see you again. I hope you enjoyed your evening. If you didn't have an opportunity to have a little brownie or treat or coffee cake, don't be shy to grab one on your way out, because if you don't, then we might be forced to eat them all, and that is not going to be a good thing. Susie, have I hit everything I needed to, or did I forget anything? No, I can go, oh, good, good. Well, it's a first. Okay. Well, everybody, thank you so much. And Kriss, I can't thank you enough. That was an amazing presentation. I really enjoyed it. And Jim.